Okay, everybody, hello and welcome to the last workshop of the semester. Today's workshop is The Limit Does Exist, Healthy Boundaries for Student Leaders. So to start, hi everybody, my name is May, pronoun she, her, and I am a student leadership consultant here in the Leadership Center. And today I will be doing our presentation. So just going over a little bit of what we will be doing and discussing is what is a boundary, importance of boundaries for student leaders, setting and sticking to boundaries, and then any time for a Q&A. Obviously, as this is recording, if you have any questions, you can always email us or contact us via social media. So to start off with a little quote from Brene Brown, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. And I think that is really, really true, especially for student leaders. It can be difficult to say no sometimes because we want to be involved. We want to do all these different aspects and gain these experiences and meet new people. But at the same time, you have to remember to care for yourself and that you take priority first. So for question number one, a little bit time to think is what comes to mind when you hear the word boundaries? So I'll give you a couple seconds if you can want to pause the video just to think about it. So now that you've thought about kind of what boundaries mean to you and what that word means, for me personally, when I hear the word boundaries, I think of making sure that I'm okay. It's very straight to the point, basis type things, but boundaries can come in all different forms, whether it is in leadership or it could be just in your personal life. There's a lot of things that boundaries are a part of, and it could be different aspects that isn't just like time. It could be like for your health. It could be for your mental stability. Like it's all these different things that can be set as a boundary. So when I think of the word boundaries, I really do think of just taking care of yourself, being able to take a step back and realize that you are first. You need to come first in a lot of situations that sometimes you might not put yourself in. So what is a boundary? Our definition is a boundary is a limit, a way of letting others know your physical and emotional capacity in any given situation. So in that case, it really does break down that you can't do everything. And that is something I'm going to be emphasizing a lot through this presentation is that we can't do everything. And sometimes we get to a point that we are drained and we are burnt out, and you have to set those boundaries for yourself. So going into it, what are the types of boundaries? So there's intellectual, emotional, physical, financial, and time. So I'm going to kind of break them down just a little bit of examples. So we'll go bottom to top. So time. For me, what this would look like is I do homework at night, and then because that's when I have time to do it, but I stop myself at 10:30. So that's making sure I'm setting a boundary for myself. That also could link to that emotional aspect of I'm exhausted and I can't keep pushing myself to do all this work because it's not going to be beneficial in the end. So setting that time boundary of, okay, I'm done at 10:30, no more schoolwork. And then it's also having that emotional aspect for myself of, okay, I'm taking care of myself and I'm going to go get some sleep. And then I can start again tomorrow for whatever I didn't finish because it's always going to be there. And you have to take care of yourself. Financially, money aspects. In a lot of things, we are college students. So money can be tight sometimes. And if everybody's wanting to go out and they want to do stuff and they want to go get dinner and all that stuff, which is awesome. But sometimes when you're like, okay, hey, I can't really go, I don't have the funds right now. And they're like, oh, come on, it's only a little bit of money, but it's taking care of yourself. It's setting that boundary. Okay, you might need to save money for something. You might have to wait for another couple of weeks for your paycheck. Like you have to be able to set that for yourself and with those people around you as well. Physical boundaries in terms of maybe any kind of relationship you have with a partner, or even if it's platonic with friends. Maybe you're not a physical touch person and they are like, okay, well, I want to hold your hand and I want to hug you and I want to just like be able to touch you. But it's like, sometimes you just want your personal space and you have to make that clear with that physical boundary. And then emotional, I kind of link that with the time, but just taking care of your well-being. And then I feel like that really can go in with intellectual as well. So kind of breaking down what are boundaries. So boundaries are a tool to help people define their individuality and indicate what they will not hold themselves responsible for. A way of letting others know what you have the capacity to give in the areas of emotional support, time, and energy. something that brings order to our lives and allows us to protect our peace in a form of self-care. The one I really want to point out is that third bullet point is something that brings order to our lives and allows us to protect our peace. And like I mentioned before, student leaders, we want to do any and everything. And it can be really, really difficult sometimes to remember that just because you want to do everything does not mean you should do everything. And there comes a point that you're just going and going and going, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I can't do it anymore. So it's really allowing us to protect our peace and make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable to care for ourselves, which is, for me personally, it is on the back burner half the time. Is that I'm like, okay, well, I'm fine. I can just keep going. And then I hit a point and I'm like, why did I do this to myself? Even if I'm enjoying it, there's still that backlash of it, depending on how hard you're pushing yourself or how involved you are. So really just making sure that we are keeping ourselves in the front part of our mind and really wanting to care. So flip that, what our boundaries are not. So the same thing as your comfort zone. Boundaries are not your comfort zone. You can set boundaries even if it's completely in your comfort zone, and you have to set them for yourself. Something that other people set for you, something to be ashamed of or feel guilty of having, and is not the same for everyone. So I think all of these are really, really important to keep in mind, especially the last one is that boundaries are not the same for everyone. People have different limits. There's some people who could go, 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 and then maybe you need to set like a little limit for themselves of, okay, well, I'm just gonna watch a movie for this day, but I'm gonna keep going. See, and you might think, oh my gosh, they're crazy. Why are they doing that to themselves? Pushing and pushing and pushing, but boundaries are not the same for everybody. So people have different staminas for that type of thing. And then also they know their own routine of self-care, so they can have that in their mind. And then I also really like the second bullet point, that is something that boundaries are not something that other people set for you. And I think that's really important to realize, because in that terms of like, it's not the same for everyone. If you see your friend going and going and going, and you're like, oh my gosh, you need to slow down, like you're going crazy, like that's not your place to say. Because yes, it's for caring and you can care for them and show, like, I could say some concern if that is needed, but it's not something that you're like, okay, you need to stop this because it's going downhill. Like that is not your place to say. So I think also remembering that people know their stuff and they know their limits and they know how they work. So not to really push their own abilities. So going on to our next part, why are boundaries important? From this little quote from Rachel Hollis: magazines and TV shows spend a lot of time focusing on what to do when we fall off the wagon, rather than teaching us how to stay on it in the first place. So why are boundaries important? We have this little circle, little diagram for you. So we'll start at the top. So it's good for mental health. Having boundaries are going to make sure you are caring for yourself. And although like mental health is a big thing, it's still something we often forget until we hit a point that we're like, oh, I'm not taking care of myself. So just keeping that in mind. Good emotional health. How are you supposed to give to others if you don't have that to give for yourself because you're burning yourself out? Develop autonomy, develop identity. Avoidance of burnout influence others' behaviors. What I really, really, really like is the avoidance of burnout, because with boundaries, I believe that burnout does come with it and they go kind of hand in hand, that if you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, you're not going to have anything else to give. Like I said about the good mental health. So now we're going to do a little think, pair, share. Obviously, like I said, a recording. So just take a couple seconds to think about it and then we'll discuss. So tell me about a time that you didn't set a great boundary and were pushed beyond your limit. What happened? How did you feel? And then post that. What could you have done differently? So you can pause it for a second, think about your answer, and then I will kind of elaborate on maybe a personal experience. So when I think of a scenario where I didn't set a boundary, I think a lot of the times it is in terms of leadership, because someone will be like, hey, can you do this for me? Do you want to do this? And I don't want to say no, because of course I want to do that. I want the experience. I want to have that interaction with people. And I am just go, go, go. I've always been a go, go, go person. And I always want to be doing something. So I I keep going. And there was a point that I could have hit a spot where I'm like, okay, I'm exhausted. I'm having fun, but I'm exhausted. So why am I dreading doing it the next day, even though I know I love it? And that's because I keep pushing and I'm not respecting my own personal boundaries that I don't realize at that point yet. And it really did have consequences because I was tired and I couldn't give to the people I was working with or my peers or even just students I was working with because I just was not in that space. So what I could have done differently is to take a step back, look at my calendar, say, okay, do I even have time in the first place to just set it in there somewhere? And then do I have the mental capacity to do that? Like schools schools a lot. We are students first as well, is that we have these other responsibilities. And then we are always adding more on because we want to be involved. We want to get these experiences. And I think if I would have done it differently, I would have laid it out and really just thought, okay, school responsibilities, what needs to be done. And then do I even have stuff to give for whatever the program might be, who the job is for. It can be the littlest things. And it doesn't have to be this big thing that, oh, I need to set this boundary right now. It's like this whole thing. Like you can start small and go from there. So going into our third part is setting and sticking to your boundaries. So strategies for maintaining good boundaries. So there are 2 slides to this one. So it's going to be a little bit of a talking for a little bit. So the first one is start small, like I just said. Set a cutoff time for answering emails or texts. Let people know when you're unavailable. Temporarily delete social media. Put your do not disturb on your phone during busy or stressful times. And I think obviously those are just small tips to help you. But I think starting small is a big one because sometimes it can feel like we are jumping too much if we're like, okay, I've hit this point, but now I don't like it anymore. I need to just create this giant boundary for myself, which some people, it's not comfortable for them. And that's not the case. So making sure that you are starting small and realizing, okay, what's the root of the problem? How can I fix it to make myself feel good right now? And then how can I fix it for that long-term goal? The next one is set them early. Communicate before you've reached your limit and create clear expectations with others. And I think that create clear expectations is really, really like the key to this part of setting them early, is that if people already know, then they are not going to try to push them too much. So if they know, okay, you have this tendency of maybe going, and then you start to feel that burnout and you start to realize you can't do it anymore, but people see it before you, let them know that, I just lost the word, vulnerability of yourself and your limits. And then when you're communicating that to your people, then that they're going to kind of get the idea of this boundary. And 3 is be consistent. Do not waver because of who it is or because you feel bad for someone, and reflect on the reason that you set this boundary in the first place. And I think it can be kind of hard because we do have the tendency of, oh, well, I really liked working with this person or doing this thing because it made me happy. So I'll let the boundary slide for this. But you have to remember that this is for you. This is for your mental being, your physical being, your emotional being. Like you have to take care of yourself. And sometimes you might really want to do it, but you have to remember why you had these boundaries in the first place. So the next one is talk about them. Talk about your boundaries. Let people know your limits in each situation, when people come to visit, in group projects, at work, etc. So it kind of goes back to set them early, like talk to others about these things. So just making sure that it's clear to every single person, if you have to have that boundary set, why you're setting it, how it's going to be most beneficial to you, and maybe how they can help, like let them know, okay, well, I have these boundaries. If you could help keep me accountable for them, because sometimes I waver and I do. And then so can you make sure, oh, if they see me in this situation, to remind me, hey, remember, you set this boundary for yourself, stick to it. Number 5 is be your own champion. You do not have to apologize for having boundaries. Don't let others decide what boundaries are right for you. And you are worthy of protecting your peace. Own that. And I really, really like this. You have to be your own advocate sometimes. And it can be difficult because you might feel uncomfortable or you might feel awkward trying to set these certain boundaries, especially if it's with certain people. But you have to remember that these are for you. And don't let others decide what boundaries are right for you. Keep it to yourself. Stay strong. Push through it. And then the last one is going to be use your personal values as a guide. Create boundaries that relate to your values. And that kind of goes off, especially with a lot of leadership roles where you're setting these because you know, for me personally, I am a big hypocrite when it comes to leadership, certain parts of it of like, okay, I'm like, okay, set boundaries for yourselves. Everybody is really important. And then I don't do that for myself. So making sure you're practicing what you preach and that you are staying true to what you are and who you are. So another thing, pair share, obviously pause the video, take a minute to think, and then we'll talk. So what is an area of your life that you're going to work on setting boundaries in? So now that you've thought about it, for me, I am going to definitely work on it in the time aspect. I really over my schedule myself sometimes, and I don't give peace. I never have peace because I'm always just going and going and thinking, okay, what's next? So I really want to be able to lay out my time wisely, put in that self-care aspect, and really make sure I'm a priority in my life. So next, we're going to go into recognizing the boundaries of others. So we have this idea, we know how to set them for ourselves, but what about other people when it comes to that? So for the first one, ask them what their boundaries are. If they look a little bit uncomfortable, or if you're in a comfortable space and they start to talk about it, ask them, okay, is this something you maybe want me to help you with to enforce as if they would do it for them, for you? Use common sense. Listen to what they are trying to communicate to you and watch for nonverbal communication. It really is all about, especially if it's someone you know and you're close with them, you see their patterns, you see how they work. Hold them accountable, hold yourself accountable, make sure you're all on the same page. And things to remember, boundaries are about trial and error. You'll get the hang of it eventually. I think that is so hard to remember sometimes because we want to set these boundaries and then we realize it doesn't work maybe, and maybe you need to change it up a bit. And that's something that you don't want to give up on, like, oh, it didn't work, so it's not even worth it. But it is worth it. So just keep trying until you figure out what is best for you. Different relationships and situations require different boundaries. So although you may have a boundary with your one friend group, it might be not the same for the other one. So making sure to apply what you know in your experiences and make sure it's beneficial to you, and you can be able to switch and turn and trial and error and make sure everything is going to work out in the end. Be patient with yourself and others and speak up and hold your ground. Remember, you deserve to protect your peace. So these are just the references that we talked about a little bit. And then, so we have bi-weekly newsletters if you want to scan the QR code here to learn about different events we have going on around campus, as well as from our center. And then give us your feedback if you want to scan this QR code as well. Give us a couple notes, take the little survey and let us know how we did, what you gained out of it. We'd love to hear. But that is all. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, like I said, you can email us at lead@kent.edu. We are located in the Student Center, second floor. And then we have our social media as well, which is at Kent State Leads. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your day.